Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 23rd of November 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And we're delighted to be joined today by Alex Thomson, bringing us Eastern approaches from Holland. And that's exactly where we're going, east.
Well, we are indeed, to The Hague. And of course, Serbian or Bosnian Serb commander Ratko Mladic was convicted for genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity yesterday. He received a life sentence well, the United Kingdom said that they strongly support the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, and they have welcomed the decision to sentence the former Bosnian Serb commander to life imprisonment as a consequence of his crimes in Bosnia and Herzegovina 1992 to 1995. Boris Johnson utterly hypocritically said, today's decision shows that however hard they might try, those who perpetrate atrocities cannot outrun justice. Ratko Mladic's conviction for genocide in Srebrenica will not bring back the thousands who lost their lives, but it does demonstrate that the architects of their suffering will be held to account. The atrocities perpetrated in the Balkans in the 1990s marked one of Europe's darkest periods. We must join together to ensure that it never happens again. Well, I don't really know what to say. But look, let's just remember some of what happened around this. And it's interesting that the skinny man here who was shaking the hand of Penny Marshall of ITN was in The Hague yesterday and was commenting on BBC PM programme last night. But in the summer of '92, Penny Marshall, alongside Ian Williams from Channel 4 News, were the first to uncover what is described as Serb-run detention camps, but which many people still say were refugee camps. And the argument is that Penny Marshall was on the inside and the refugees were on the outside.
Of that fence.
Of that fence. Now, that accusation was said to be false, and ITN absolutely defended it. And in fact, they took a small newspaper called formerly Living Marxism, but it was called LM Magazine at the time. They took them to court for libel for suggesting that Penny Marshall and ITN had fabricated this report. In fact, John Simpson of the BBC at the time had supported the allegations against Penny Marshall. He then subsequently apologised for supporting LM Magazine in the court case, but still there's still some scepticism over it. I would just say, I just ask the question, really, are there parallels to be drawn with Saving Syria's Children BBC documentary? Obviously, that was in Syria at a much later time, but nonetheless, the question needs to be asked, are there parallels, particularly in the sort of impact that the two reports had on the general public and on the political will to take certain types of action. Just as a side note here, I note that the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry, who had said that she would support Robert Stewart in trying to get some answers from the BBC over Saving Syria's Children, has now taken a step back from that. But Alex, the reaction in Bosnia to this news of Mladic's conviction seems to be creating some division. I just wonder if you've got any thoughts on his conviction and Boris Johnson's thoughts about his conviction and what happened in Bosnia at the time.
Well, for a real rundown, people should watch a 2010 film available on YouTube called The Weight of Chains, Težina Lanca, by Boris Malagurski, which was funded by the Serbian diaspora in Australia. But it contains a very cogent line of reporting with documents on screen and interviews. And one of the main theses that comes out of that is that the Wes Clark, Bill Clinton administration, so the White House and the Pentagon respectively, found that it aligned very closely as the 80s drew into the 90s with Germany's aims, which was to break up Yugoslavia, something we've discussed in other formats as well. And so it really was the predetermination that there would be a Bosnia and a Kosovo which were separate from Serbia and which were abidingly dependent on US and European military and legal presence, which really prompted things. In particular, there's a claim never been refuted that Clinton in '93, so around the time of Srebrenica, and in fact, but by going back into '92, when Germany was precipitating all this by recognizing the republics, that at that stage Clinton was already saying, or people around him, the price of US intervention, which happened, of course, with the Dayton Accords and the time prior to that, the price of that intervention will be thousands of dead Muslims. So there's also increasing suggestions here in the Netherlands, because it was a Dutch battalion which was keeping the peace in Srebrenica. An increasing number of soldiers are now saying openly, together with French former comrades as well, that they were set up to fail, and that many of the so-called radical mujahideen who were picking off those ethnic Serbian villages around the Srebrenica pocket in order to force a response from Mladic's men, that these were actually US trained men. That's a theme we're going to see later with other parts of Eastern Europe, US and UK stirring up using false flag snipers.
Well, let's move straight on to Kosovo, because something rotten in the statelet of Kosovo, Alex.
Yes, we can't really call Kosovo a state, so we have to adapt the Hamlet quotation. Kosovo is basically an entity which exists so that Camp Bondsteel, the US military presence, and the ULEX and UNMIC, the EU's and UN's alphabet soup presence, can be justified. So it's basically a think tank and a US and an EU outpost with a justification, which is ethnic Albanian irredentism. Now, I spoke to Dr. Olsi Yazigi about this, and also to a Dutchman who is very expert in Kosovo. And what they've pointed out is that Mr. Simmons, who has resigned from the EU's legal advice here, who was supposedly teaching the rule of law to Kosovo, he's resigned. There was some kerfuffle over, spying on people's emails and romantic and intrigues. But at the heart of it, he went off in a huff and told Le Monde, the French newspaper of record, that actually this was a political mission, and it was there to take out a certain clan of Kosovars and put in another certain clan of Kosovars into power. This is exactly what I'm getting from my Dutch expert contacts as well. Kosovo is a European colony.
Okay, and let's move on to Russia then, because, what's going on with the Japanese moving a warship for joint exercises with the Russians to Vladivostok?
Yes, this is on VST, the main public broadcaster's evening news on Channel 1 in Russia, and the Hamagiri is a Japanese warship. Now, technically, Russia and Japan are still at war over this very area, the Pacific, because of the 1905 war. But this is actually the 17th Japanese naval visit, despite there not having been a formal truce, or a formal peace accord, only a truce. But this time they're actually having brotherly exercises between the sailors, and even joint training. So we're seeing a number of things come to the fore. President Trump recently said, apropos of the same visit to both Japan and China, that he got on very well with both Shinzo Abe and President Xi Jinping. So the US, in the form of the Trump administration, may have actually been urging Japan not to be what it was from 1905 onward, which is the West's dagger at the heart of Asia, as it were, and it actually may have told them to go with the Russo-Chinese productive Eurasian infrastructure plans. That seems to be what's going on here. And of course, the other thing that happened that year was Britain tried to get one over on Germany and the States with the dreadnought, and Russia put out feelers to Germany, leading to the Treaty of Björn to form an industrial union. And really, that was what precipitated both world wars, that period 1905, 1906. So if Russia's got to the stage of undoing that and seeking friendship with Germany and Japan again, then the whole of the 20th century has just been reversed.
Big moves afoot, I think. But of course, Ukraine is still in the mix. And some people beginning to ask who fired the shots in the last Ukrainian revolution. Are we getting a hint that some people are asking some serious questions? Because, I mean, there are similar questions being asked, for example, in Syria.
Oh, absolutely, Mike. I'll have to be very summary here because we have a packed news and we could talk for a whole hour about this. What's happened is that an Italian news channel has discovered that there's been 3 Georgian snipers. I won't try to get the slides to stay on screen. People will just have to freeze frame and read. I'll summarize. 3 Georgian snipers have confessed while sitting on a park bench in Skopje, Macedonia, to Italian journalists that they were members of the then Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili's sniper team, and they were recruited by a certain Mr. Mamulashvili to go and help the brothers in Ukraine to repeat the Saakashvili revolution. This is not the Orange Revolution in Ukraine. This is the 2013-2014 very violent one, the Maidan. And so there they are. They've got the names up. If there's Mr. Koba Nergadze, and the other 2, Alexandre, I forget his surname right now, but they all have very interesting things to say. They say that Saakashvili personally ordered their presence there, that they were forced to go. This is all consistent with what I was seeing at the time. And crucially, they identified by name, which I ringed on the previous slide, the US trainer who was basically their handler throughout the period, a former para from the 101st Airborne, whom they name, and they have a mugshot of him. The Italians do anyway. So this is very serious stuff. They mention Lithuanian connections, Estonian connections, Macedonian connections. It's a veritable borscht of Eastern European agents. But tying it all together are the Americans and I suspect Brits. I know some of these networks, they run through individuals in the intelligence agencies and the military, and especially the consultancies when people leave service. So it's not the agencies themselves that are doing this. It's certain individuals of Satanist bent in both Britain and America who, as these Georgian snipers confess now, because they have very heavy consciences from what happened afterwards, they confess that they were used, and that the point of having them there was to create chaos to prevent Yanukovych staying on in power.
Sorry, Alex. One of the fascinating things is that if we look at the Italian reports here, the one on the right, it says, once in Kiev, Alexander told us our role was to organize false flags to force the police to charge at the demonstrators. And then it goes on to say Catherine Ashton was told this reality within days of the event. And what did she do?
Correct.
What did she do subsequently?
Absolutely, Zil. She was the inaugural holder of the EU's foreign ministry post, the EAS, External Action Service. Now it's Federica Mogherini. Now, this wasn't the Georgian being quoted there. It's the way that article began, Gli occhi della guerra, the eyes of war, which did the expose. They start off by setting the scene, which is that Russian intelligence leaked a never contested recording in which Urmas Paet, the then Estonian foreign minister, Estonia again, called Lady Ashton in a fit of panic, really, a few days after these deaths in Maidan, and said, we have a problem. The ballistics and post-mortem, the autopsies, all show that both sides were shot by the same snipers, same bullets, same angles, etc. And she is on the recording basically saying, oh dear, how are we going to cover this up, in polite language, and nothing ever came of that. And now we know why. It's because these Lithuanians, the Ukrainian right factor, the neo-fascists, pretty much everyone in Eastern Europe was there, Uncle Tom Cobley and all shooting at everyone to create chaos.
So the parallels with what happened in Syria in 2011 are pretty stark.
Oh, very much so. There's already been a BBC claim about who was shooting, and in 2015 they came out with a documentary from the BBC Russian service saying it was Yanukovych, the nasty pro-Russian president. And so I've ringed that. If you go to the Italian expose with Russian and English dubbing and subtitles, you'll see what I've ringed. You get a suggestion for the next video is the BBC's version. If you go to that, the top 2 rated comments are people saying, come off it, BBC. Yanukovych stood to gain nothing from this, and he was never pro-Russian anyway. The goal of this revolution, they say, was to exasperate people enough to provoke a revolution. And so the answer to who would benefited would be the CIA.
Yeah.
And that leads us straight, sorry, Alex, that leads us straight back into the so-called black ops field, where we have a mix of people who have come out of specialist military organisations mixed with the money to fund them and their operations. This is a very dirty field.
That is exactly where we need to be looking, Brian. Former MI6, former SAS, that caliber of men, I say caliber not morally, but in terms of training and contacts, same across the Atlantic, and they have had a long, long history of manipulating their colleagues within the services, and also particularly using the Europeans as pawns. I was going to say prawns. That's probably a very Freudian slip. They gobble them up for dinner. But this is what Gladio was about, both the classic Gladio and also Gladio B, as Sibel Edmonds presents it. The Brits and Americans creating a maelstrom wherever they go.
And in the meantime, the players are all perhaps going to join the EU Customs Union and the Schengen area.
Yeah, so the EU has lost Britain, but never mind, without actually gaining any more member states, because that's taboo now. The goody two-shoes of the EU and NATO's policies in Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Georgia and Moldova, the ones that keep having bloody contretemps with Russia and with their own people, they could be basically made members of the Customs Union and Schengen, although not the single market. According to the European Parliament, there will be talks with the neighbourhood states, so the Ukrainian government and so on, next week. But at the bottom there, I've identified something which has been a trend for a while, which is that Europe, largely through investment banking and certain setups like the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the EBRD, is very keen to own the infrastructure of these former Soviet republics, which is exactly, of course, the outcome for German and American business out of the bombing of Yugoslavia at both ends of the 90s, is that the infrastructure was flattened and someone got a nice cushy number to replace that infrastructure with American and European standards.
And of course, the last thing they want is Belt and Road getting involved.
Oh, absolutely, because the Balkans is and Eurasia generally is crucial for the transit of people, energy, etc. So now this is very crucial stuff. You'll see later on in the news who actually stands to benefit. And just as a codicil there, the stateless former Saakashvili who ordered this, and if we're to believe the Georgian snipers' confessions, he has now pushed himself across the Polish-Ukrainian border illegally, and the Ukrainians have now let it be known that they're weeping no tears for him and that they're going to try to extricate him quietly before New Year to Poland.
Well, you mentioned Trump earlier, and of course and Russia as well, and Russiagate continues to rumble on. And of course, right at the heart of Russiagate are the same types of people that you've just been talking about, particularly British security services and Fusion GPS in particular. This organisation, not directly linked, but ex-security services, fair to say, Alex?
Oh yes, I can't push it too far, but what is claimed in the media about Mr. Steele has a very high chance of being entirely accurate about his former employment.
So it's Christopher Steele, isn't it?
That's
yes,
correct.
Christopher
yes.
Steele, ex-MI6, allegedly ex-MI6, wrote the dodgy dossier, which is at the centre of the whole Russiagate thing. And the Washington Examiner here is pointing out that Fusion GPS, apparently they claim, paid journalists, or so they don't claim, they report, because it has appeared in court papers, that Fusion GPS had paid journalists to promote the dodgy dossier. So this is a filing, a related filing by House lawyers, House of the House of Representatives, which asserts that Fusion GPS brokered meetings for dossier author Christopher Steele with at least 5 major media outlets in September 2016, including Yahoo News. But the names of the journalists that were involved directly are still redacted, so we don't know who they are. But that's a pretty spectacular discovery. It's in court papers, so it's an allegation at the moment. But if it's true, it adds well. What does it do to the whole Russiagate story?
Well, it makes it a matter of political inquiry, and of course, Congress, particularly the House of Representatives, when it gets its teeth into something, it will not let go. Everyone knows, for example, Congressman Trey Gowdy from South Carolina, and there are a couple of others now from different wings of the Republican Party who've really put a spanner in the works of this smooth Anglo-American behind-the-scenes operation, because they've shown that actually they have got wind of it and they're not going to let go. And I don't think that had been reckoned with. I mean, the technique of paying journalists is well known in the agencies for sometimes legitimate national security aims. But this is the danger. If you have disreputable men who leave mid-service, particularly under a cloud or disgruntled that they were passed over for preferment, then they've got all their tricks and their address books intact, and they can go off and do the same thing for the dark side. That seems to be what's going on here. But the House of Representatives will ferret it out, I'm quite sure, and we've seen the evidence that they can be pretty explosive in their questioning.
Well, in the meantime, we mentioned the Trust Project a few days ago, and of course this is the mainstream media's reaction to Russiagate, fake news, all this nonsense that they're pushing very hard. They realise that they're losing this narrative spectacularly, so they've decided to band together with the big tech companies in order to establish the principle of who is a trustworthy news source. This is the Trust Project. 75 new news organizations now already signed up to it. Microsoft, Twitter, Facebook, Google, all part of it. And the idea is that organizations will have news stories tagged in order to sort of identify them as meeting certain standards for ethics and transparency. If we have the situation that a organization linked to the security services is paying journalists for the distribution of dodgy content, how can there possibly be any trust? But their response, rather than actually trying to deal with the corruption that there is in that and other things that they've been up to, is to get together and try to create some kind of what is this? Some kind of
it's censorship, Mike.
Well, it is, but it's more than that, because they're creating a cartel. Is that the right word?
Well, it's a censorship net which is all embracing. This is amazingly dangerous stuff. And of course, the key drivers through the big web companies are private corporations, are corporations. So we've got the power straight back into the big corporations and the money boys.
Just briefly, Alex.
Now, there are two key concepts in continental journalism which the whole of this process since Leveson has been seeking to foist on Fleet Street. And these are the principles of collegiality and solidarity, which basically mean, as you've said, Mike, a closed network, a stitch-up, a cartel. And you don't print anything that might cause fellow parliamentarians or journalists to come into question, at least among the mainstream. That's what's meant by the continental journalistic cartel model. And, if this goes ahead, journalists will be in a guild and largely answerable to each other. Well, they're all already pretty much in an echo chamber trying to virtue signal to each other rather than to please the public, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Well, they are. I hope our audience today appreciates the depth of analysis that's coming out. We've covered Eastern European issues. Let's move on to justice in UK. So Boris Johnson crowing that the right decision was made in that court internationally. But let's have a look at what's actually going on in UK. Now, this is what we covered yesterday. So very quickly, a case going back to November 2015, where 3 Hampshire County Council social workers were found wanting by a judge, lying on oath, altering basically reports that were taken through as evidence and withholding evidence from the court. So these were serious charges that the judge made in his judgment. The judge's opinion was then overturned by Hampshire Council working with an organisation looking after professional standards for social workers. And so our first point was, well, this is quite amazing that it doesn't matter what a judge says in court. If you're in the right organisation, you simply overturn his judgment. Well, this one just beats everything, because today somebody has contacted us talking about what's been going on in the family courts. And this relates to a case which we believe is going on in the Midlands. We believe it's to do with immigrant community. We've had reports of women in immigrant communities in the Sheffield area certainly coming forward and trying to protect their children against abuse. Authorities then release their names back into the community, and the women are raped, beaten up, or both. What's going on here is a court case where the judge is refusing to accept video evidence of child abuse. So the evidence is there to show what is going on in this particular case, but the judge is simply saying, no, my eyes do not want to see this evidence, so it can't be brought into court. So therefore the court is running a completely alternative court case. This situation was challenged. You can obviously freeze the screen to look at the detail of the excerpt that I've given you. I can only give you so much. But this is the utterly astonishing thing that we've got here, because this is the response from Sir James Mumby's office, President of the Family Law Division. The President can only deal with the cases that come before him in a judicial capacity. He cannot investigate, comment, give advice on the decisions made by other judges. This is not out of any lack of concern, but because to do so would undermine the principle that judges are free to decide how cases should be conducted. So you can read the rest of that email, but what we're essentially saying is where there is video evidence of child abuse, family court judges can simply say, no, I don't want to see that evidence. I'm going to make my judgment without seeing the evidence of the actual child abuse. This is astonishing. This email is astonishing and shows that we cannot trust family court decisions in any shape or form. Alex, just give you
well, just before I just wanted to look at that again. So to do so would undermine the principle that judges are free to decide how cases should be conducted. So if you have a corrupt judge, and nobody can deny that such a thing exists. If you have a corrupt judge, what this email seems to be saying is the president of the Family Law Division, the head of the department, as it were, has no power to investigate or deal with the corruption of a judge.
That's absolutely right. And I come back to the fact that what we're dealing with here is not some sort of hearsay. We're dealing with video footage of child abuse. So just a remarkable admission by Sir James Mumby's office. Now, it has come from his office. It's possible that Sir James isn't really aware of this reply, but it has come from his office. This is very, very dangerous precedence, Alex.
Yes, we keep talking about Sir James because he's a very conflicted character, and he had some good in his life before, I think. So what's happening with him now is anyone's guess. It's the same with anyone in high authority. But the point of the matter is not personal. It is that we were fools to accept the argument a couple of decades ago that there could be any trials without juries at this level. The creation of the family division and the removal of the juries allows these kinds of prima facie mistrials, as someone has said in the chat room. This is a mistrial on the face of it, to occur, because judges are acting as juries. Now, from William Penn's trial onwards, read Ken Dowdney's book. It's actually on the front cover of his book, the William Penn trial. From that trial onwards, we have established that whatever judges may tell us and be trained to believe in their law school education, juries in English law and, in fact, in Scots law are the judges of the facts and of the law.
Yes.
But they can't be judges of either of those things if they've been removed. And to quote The Simpsons, of course, it started with, "Won't someone please think of the children?" So we had to have no juries because of these sensitive issues of custody and child abuse. Then it moved on to the elderly with the Court of Protection. Then it was fraud with that the juries are too thick and waste public funds by not following the number crunching in fraud trials. And before you know it, the jury trial is more of an exception than a rule without having been formally abolished. So that this is the creep that happens if we allow ourselves to be told that there are some exceptions to the principles of English law.
And Alex, I'll just add to that, well, it's a reminder, isn't it, that this is the situation inside Britain, and yet we have people like Boris Johnson lecturing other countries, other politicians on how to conduct their affairs. This is hypocrisy and duplicity of its worst kind. Where does all this lead? Well, this brings us back to our advert that we've been saying today. A lady may be evicted in Plymouth. The details are on the screen, plus text, which has been compiled by Danny Bamping, a very accurate text on what has been going on in her case. But essentially, a lady made bankrupt under false pretenses because she has assets, but the aim is that her home is taken from her. She's 61 years old. She's a vulnerable widow, but we see fraud and corruption in UK courts. Have a look at that text, freeze that on screen. And I'm going to back it up with this email that's come into us today from a lady called Elizabeth Watson. And she is suffering the same fraudulent attack through Britain's courts, which is aimed at taking away property. And here she's saying that there is no proof of any of the debts or charges made against her. And why is this happening? So have a look at that email yourself. But this is the state of Britain while Theresa May, Boris Johnson and others lecture countries overseas on how to conduct their affairs.
Well, speaking of fraud and corruption, RBS, well, this is good news, Brian, because RBS is to be, well, the privatisation of RBS is to be relaunched. The government yesterday said that it was going to relaunch the sale of Royal Bank of Scotland, and they were hoping to sell, its 71% stake for around £15 billion, and they were hoping to sell £3 billion worth of shares each year up until 2023. Now, they had previously attempted to do this, but things got in the way and whatnot. But the Treasury said yesterday, RBS has made significant progress in resolving its legacy issues and refocusing on serving British businesses and consumers. I don't think RBS has made any progress whatsoever on solving what are being described as legacy issues. There are still significant numbers of people who used to own small and medium-sized businesses who had those businesses destroyed by RBS that are still trying to get justice. And also, unfortunately, RBS has just been named in a new lawsuit. So this is a group of banks accused of rigging the US Treasury's markets. And this is a class action lawsuit which has been refiled in the New York Federal Court. And Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, RBS, BNP Paribas and UBS are charged with rigging US Treasuries. And so we wait to see what comes out of that. But the allegations, the charges, the convictions continue to rumble on. But don't worry, it's all fine. Everything's back to normal. RBS is doing a great job, and so we're going to sell. The government is going to sell its shares, and that's all going to be great.
Well, it's not, Mike. It's not. And what's the best way of showing what's going on with the banking industry? Let's switch the subject to the NHS. This is a photograph taken on the London Underground a couple of weeks ago. I was with some members of the British Constitution Group travelling back from a private talk, and I noticed this advert, and a gentleman, Adrian, kindly took a photograph of it. So here we are. See an NHS GP in minutes for free, 24/7, and this is all about an app on your phone. But what caught my eye was down in this corner, where the company who is running this is called Babylon, and I was absolutely fascinated at that name. Well, to my surprise or not, The Guardian has suddenly picked up on this. This is the article: seeing a GP on a smartphone sounds wonderful, but it's not. Encourage people to go and read this article. I'll just give you a little bit here. It says, on the surface, GP at hand sounds wonderful. The NHS finally embracing technological advances in IT, offering almost immediate access when some are waiting 3 weeks for a non-urgent GP appointment. But while anyone can join its service, the website says it may not be suitable for complex mental health problems or complex physical, psychological or social needs, or if you're pregnant or older and frail, and as long as you don't have dementia or learning difficulties or safeguarding issues.
So are those not the types of people that actually want to go and see a GP?
Well, one would have thought so, and credit to the Guardian article here, the lady is on the case. This new service is cherry-picking its target population. This is worse than just failing to provide equal access. It undermines the basis on which GP practices achieve financial stability. We get paid an average of $151.37 a year for each registered patient. Now, you need to read the article, but the article to me was very interesting because I smell a little bit of fear here. So let's have a look at the company. This is part of their website. We're Babylon. Fascinating to see that if you want to join Babylon staff, you've got to drink a lot of Peroni beer, apparently. So here they are, young, fit, healthy, beer-drinking youngsters, and they are going to look after our needs through the NHS. So I tried to look at who Babylon actually were. I found it remarkably difficult until I went looking at individuals. And here's Dr. Ali Parsa. This is a quote: when we see how much can be done with existing technology to improve access to healthcare for people everywhere, we ask ourselves two simple questions. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? There are no excuses for not trying.
Oh, hold on a second, but that's exactly the type of argument that a drug dealer makes. If it wasn't me, it would be somebody else.
That's the quote from Dr. Parsa, and I went having a look at who he is, so we'll bring him up on screen. And quite a few website referrals to this man say that he was an Iranian refugee. The suggestion is that he just about got out of Iran and he found sanctuary in this country. But very quickly, we find that he's had a very interesting background because he's mixing with Silicon Valley. He's helping the Said Business School in Oxford. He set up a company with a mere 200 million, a little bit of a banking background. We'll come on to that. And then he's advising the UK Cabinet Office on mutuals. So very interesting refugee, just pops up and next minute, a couple of £100 million. But what are they doing? Well, they're on a mission. They're on a mission to transform healthcare for everyone on earth.
Oh, really?
We don't have any problems in the NHS. We've got Babylon. So they were founded with a single purpose: to put an accessible and affordable health service in the hands of every person on earth. That's quite a claim. That's quite a vision. One could almost say, are you sane to have a vision quite like that? Well, let's have a look at this man. Here he is. So we'll put a few pieces in. Banking background with Goldman Sachs, who we've just had on screen. So now I get some sort of idea of where we might get the odd 200 million from, possibly. Then he sets up this company with the 200 million, Circle Holdings. This gets a contract to run a hospital management scheme in Huntingdonshire, but the company pulls out just as the Care Quality Commission rates the hospital as inadequate. So that's a bit of a shame. He sets up Babylon, and a whole load of finance people get involved with a quick extra $25 million for that. So we've got Kinnevik, Adam Bailon, John Wright, DeepMind Technologies. You might like to investigate that. That's pretty interesting. And here we are with the Cabinet Office as ambassador for mutuals. So we're into life insurance, building society type organisations, all big money. And all of a sudden, he's got big contracts with the NHS. You were interested in pictures, Mike. If people have a look at that NHS brochure on screen, fascinating to see man cuddling the little baby. I don't get a good feeling about this picture. There's also a little rainbow down in the bottom of it, but I'll leave our audience to think about that. But let's come on to the main bit, which of course is Babylon. So the city of wickedness, I think you'll pick up on this, Alex. This is all to do with Ishtar and the gates from Babylon, which of course are now preserved, complete with the altar in a museum in Berlin. How do we get from an Iranian refugee to somebody driving huge transformation of the NHS, including the fact we're going to get rid of GPs and you're going to talk to an AI robot?
I think, Brian, only through the financial elite, and particularly as someone again in the chat room has said, the insurance companies would love this, because you're hiving off the beautiful people or the worried well or whatever, and you're giving them the privileged access. And then in the really difficult cases, the majority of the GP's caseload is left to the 99% of doctors who are not allowed in, because someone's already ferreted out that they boast on their website that they only take 1% of the doctors who apply to them in their rigorous selection process. So it's very much a pyramid or layered healthcare system, which is exactly what you had in the ancient world, of course, particularly Babylon and Egypt with their sacerdotal elitism. It's very rare for a Persian to use the name Babylon. Iranians are very proud of their heritage, and they usually would call a company Persepolis or some other Esfahan or some other Persian name. But Babylon, yes, it was taken over by the Persians, but not a Persian city. Very, very odd stuff. And as for his catchphrase, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? That was used word for word by Emma Watson, the Harry Potter actress, to launch her He for She third wave feminist campaign at the United Nations last year. So same backers?
Good question.
Alex, I'm going to smile and say you astonish me. You've taken us from Eastern Europe to Harry Potter, but this is the state of British politics at the moment, and I'm going to introduce the word policy again. If people want to understand what's happening, they must look at the people driving the policy, and in this case, the policy that's coming in to privatise the NHS under the name Babylon.
So earlier in the week, Alex, we kept, well, you wanted to mention it today. Earlier in the week, the UK lost its seat on the International Court of Justice at the United Nations because apparently a lot of developing countries ganged up and decided that India would be a better bet.
Yes, so Dalvir Bandari was chosen after 6 rounds of whittling down the opposition. The group of 77, basically, what used to be the non-aligned movement, has decided that it's had enough of British hegemony, particularly over legal services, which is where Britain had its real big shots. And the man who Britain thought was a shoo-in until it was embarrassed out of it was none other than Sir Christopher Greenwood, the author of the 2002 legal advice telling the government, in his capacity as a law professor in those days, that it was quite all right to invade Saddam Hussein's Iraq without a UN mandate.
And this is the first time that in the United Nations history that Britain has not held a seat.
Correct, although of course the common law and the English language continue to be represented by Bandari, but this is really the dissolution yet again of the victors' order, or the pecking order of the 20th century, with the Anglo-French, Zionist, Russian, Chinese stitch-up with 2 wings within it. That's all going to the winds now. Eurasia's a thing, and the Anglo-Saxons are in retreat.
Yes. Okay, well, Brian, I put this one in specially for you because HMS Diamond has had to abort its mission to the Gulf because it broke down. This is one of the new Type 45 frigates. Yes,
billion
£1 billion.
pounds. Yeah.
And I hear there's another Type 45 that's just tied up permanently in Portsmouth Harbour. It's used for training and so on, but basically there aren't enough staff and parts to actually get it out of port. This one apparently can't actually get into the Mediterranean.
What do we say?
Yes,
well,
it's getting more difficult.
The first thing I'm going to say is that somebody had a little dig at me yesterday saying, was I being disloyal to Britain's armed services by giving the amount of information I do about the state of them? My answer to that is absolutely not, because without this being exposed, young men and women will be sent to war, will put their lives in danger, having insufficient men and equipment, defective units, so their lives are going to be put at risk. So I am very happy to be taking the lid off the sheer lies and deception by the British Ministry of Defence and the Royal Navy itself over what I would call the treasonous state of the Royal Navy. That slide that you just had up there with HMS Diamond, apparently they had problems with the propeller. It said the crew couldn't fix this. Well, of course, one of the reasons is they might not have had the specialists on board because there's a vast manning problem. The second thing is now very little training to actually fix things at sea. Much of the equipment that used to be on ships to machine items, to produce things at sea, to correct defects that occurred at sea, all of those stripped out, and you're supposed to rely on the corporation that helped build the ship in the first place.
Yes, because you're not allowed, because that would be, corporate secrets.
Corporate secrets, and you're breaking the contract. So this is like nurses not being able to clean NHS wards because a private company has a contract to do the cleaning. So let's bring in the next one. This is HMS Daring. This is the one you're alluding to. So we've got another £1 billion Type 45 ship simply sitting alongside as a, quote, harbour training ship due to manning issues. £1 billion worth of taxpayers' money sat strapped alongside because we can't man it. And why can't we man it? Because the whole of the recruitment system was destroyed by the government taking on Capita. And luckily, I'm going to say more and more people are on the case. So have a look at Save the Royal Navy website. Some really excellent information, which I'll just give you a little look at. But we've got a picture here and it says ongoing manpower issues revealed by status of Royal Navy surface escorts. What are they talking about? Well, they've got a picture of Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier with, quote, a third of the RN's available surface escort. 2 ships, totally inadequate because that carrier would have to have a tanker as well, would have to have other support ships around it, 2 escorts, absolutely unworkable. This is where we see the plan to bring in the UN military unification. But have a look at this list. It's only the red ships which are serviceable out of this selection of units. This is not accidental. This is engineered breakdown of the Royal Navy. It is treason. And if you want to know what's going on for the next phase, we've now got British Aerospace restructuring. Mike, this is exactly what David Ellis from Strategic Defence Initiatives warned was going to be happening. So we're now about to see Rolls-Royce and British Aerospace merged into most likely big American companies like Lockheed. So the whole of our capability stripped out. Why? In order to form the unified EU military system. The Russians here pointing a finger at the French and sniggering because the French have apparently sent a stealth frigate into the Black Sea, and the Russians are saying, we can see you. I'd just like to say that, of course, the main stealth was the deception of David Cameron's Tories in setting up these pan-EU military agreements, such as the Franco-British agreement.
Yeah.
Treason.
Alex, we'll end on this one, but what's going on with the new Dutch Defence Secretary?
The Defence Secretary of State was appointed because the resignation of the previous one, which we covered, when this gentleman, the leader of the Forum for Democracy, Mr. Thierry Baudet, had a go at her and actually walked into the Parliament chamber wearing the substandard equipment which was being doled out to Dutch troops in Mali, where there was a fatal accident. And now he's tabling a question to the new minister. In the Dutch system, the answer doesn't come for several days because the ministers are not MPs, they come in specially. But perhaps you can read out there what exactly the question was that he posed.
Yeah, he said, Madam Speaker, during the debate on the 3rd of October on the fatal mortar fire accident in Mali, which led to the resignation of the last Secretary of State for Defence, we, the Forum for Democracy, called attention to the poor materiel which our military men and women are being deployed with on overseas missions. Many of our servicemen are feeling compelled to purchase more adequate kit at their own expense. It is clear to us that my speech opened a can of worms. Within it, the military as well as outside it, the Forum for Democracy was inundated with online comments, emails, mobile messages and phone calls from servicemen and others involved in our military who could confirm that we have what we've been saying and providing us with more information about the problems with military equipment. Pursuant to those responses, which we have received from our considerable military support base, I have 3 specific questions for the new Secretary of State. Has a selection and tendering procedure already been launched in order to order new decent kit for our men and women of the armed forces to replace the flimsy flak jackets, the plastic boots, the shortage of munitions, the ill-functioning radios and the lack of safe bunks on bases, which is forcing our soldiers to sleep in tents, rendering them vulnerable to rocket attacks? If so, when will the better material become available to our men and women in the field? And if not, why has this not yet occurred and when can we expect it to happen? The Cabinet Agreement, which has just kept Mark Rutte as the Prime Minister for a 3rd term, pledges to invest an extra €1.5 billion in defence. Can the Secretary of State undertake to ensure that this sum will be spent such that military personnel and overseas missions are provided with top quality equipment as quickly as possible? We and the thousands of servicemen whose name we ask, who defend the Netherlands day and night, look forward to a full answer.
Yes, well, there's no MPs like that in Britain, are there, Mike? And this is what's really annoyed the Dutch establishment about this Forum for Democracy. It now has 2 out of the 150 seats since this spring's election. If there was an election tomorrow, polls say they would have 11 or 12 seats, so 6 times as many within a few months of appearing in Parliament, because they ask questions like this. And it's Mr. Baudet who has brought the term the cartel of parties into the public focus, because, again, as we were discussing with journalism, this is how continental elitism works at the political level as well. We're all in the same club together. And of course, he's not quite seen or not publicly said yet that this is about EU military union, but it is, because the Dutch are being rolled into German units which do not have any supply problems.
Yeah. Alex, thank you very much for joining us. Some excellent analysis today. We'll end here, and I'll just say thank you very much for all of you who put orders for UK pens in yesterday. To the extent we've been a little bit overwhelmed, and our own supplies have now run out. We've got more pens ordered, but there will be a little bit of a delay.
About a week or so.
About a week before those pens will be sent out. But thank you very much for responding. And once we've got the full new stocks in, we'll do a little bit more advertising in time for Christmas. So there we are. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.